Hey guys, this is Mihai from Pixel Makers. We are a Webflow development agency specializing in building awesome websites and apps using Webflow. So in this video, I want to walk you through how we've created this gated blog clonable and what you can do to make it yours. So first, let's see the live website. I'm going to log out. So let's see what you can do as a user on our gated blog. So if we click on a blog article, we see that we need to authenticate to read. So I'm going to click join. I will input one of my emails and click continue. Alright, it says that we need to check our email to continue with this gated blog. So I'm going to open up my email and I see here that it sent me a magic link. So I'm going to click on login and I see that I'm logged in right away. So now if I click on a blog article, I can read it, comparing to the previous state where I couldn't. Also, I see that if I click on billing, I'm already subscribed here. So that's the reason why I can read this blog article. If I go ahead and go to billing and cancel the plan, actually I'm going to cancel this plan from Stripe directly so I can show you how it looks when you don't have a subscription. So I see that in subscriptions I have this user. I'm going to cancel this user immediately without a refund, which means that now if we refresh and go to this blog article, I can't read it because I'm not subscribed. So I'm going to click on subscribe. I will put in my credit card, actually not mine, but the test one from Stripe. Some date in the future, 1, 2, 3, John Doe for card holder because we don't care. I'll click on pay and subscribe and we see that it went through. And now if we go to blog article, we see that we can finally read it. And if we go again to billing, we see that we are subscribed and we can see our invoices. Awesome. So let's see how we achieve this. So the first thing you can do, you have a link in the description of this video and it leads you to this clonable on Webflow. You can clone it in Webflow, duplicate it to your account, and once that is done, you will need to subscribe, or actually to create an account first on supabase.com and create a project. Once you're in Supabase, you'll see this screen here. You will need to go to table editor and add 2 tables, one for articles and one for profiles. So in articles, we will need to create these columns here, ID, which is an integer. This one is usually created automatically when we click on new table here, ID created at, and then we will need a Webflow WF_ID, which will store the Webflow ID. Same for the slug and body, all 3 are texts. Then we will need another table for profiles, which will have ID created at, Stripe ID, subscribe, and email. Now, you can put this exact same types. One thing to keep in mind is that when you create a profile, you click on this link button and you select auth here and link it with the users table, the ID column. And this will ensure that the profiles are linked with the users, because the way we've built it is that we store Stripe ID, subscribe, and email in addition to the user information. So by default in Supabase, we get all of these columns and we get a nice and easy way to handle authentication, but we cannot really extend it. So to extend it, we need to create a new table and link this new table with the authentication table. And this is the way we choose to do it for this particular project. Now, once you have these 2 tables, we will need to do some logic to basically create a new profile every time a new user is created. So in order to do that, we need to open the SQL editor and in here we will need to paste this code. Or actually, yes, before we paste this code, because if you paste and run, it won't work yet, we will need to go to database and functions and create this function, create user profile on sign up. So to create a function in Supabase, we need to click on create a new function. We give it that name. For return type, in this case, we put trigger. And then we will need to insert this code, which will insert into the profile ID and email, and a new ID and a new email. We'll need to check this, and for the security type, we'll do definer and confirm. Once we do this, we will have a new function created. And now if we go to SQL editor and run this code, which you can find in the blog article, when you run it, it's going to attach the trigger to the table, and now every time a user gets created, it will also create this profile. So once this is done, we can start building the logic. So in terms of functions which we've built into this project, we have sorry, so I'll present that a bit later. So we have a few server-side functions which we are running using something called Supabase Edge functions. So in order to create a new Supabase functions project, what you will need to do is to open up your terminal and navigate to your specific folder. So I have a folder for Webflow clonables, and now you will need to install the Supabase CLI if you don't have that already. So if you search for Supabase CLI, it will lead you to this article, and depending on your machine, you will need to follow that specific guide. In my case, I've installed it using Brew on Mac OS, and you also need to install the Docker desktop application. It has two different install processes if you're Mac OS or Windows. Once you have the CLI installed, you need to run Supabase init and Supabase start. That will link your project. In this setup, you'll also link your project, your Supabase account with your local machine. So once you do this, you can just create a new folder. In my case, I do mkdir and create the folder, get it log new, let's say. Alright, so once I do this, I'm going to open up VS Code to view this code. So in my VS Code editor, I'm going to open up a new terminal, and now I can do Supabase init to create a new project. I do yes for this, and I have a new Supabase project created. So once I have this, I can just run Supabase functions new Webflow webhook for the first function, and this will create my Webflow webhook function. Alright, you can just take the code which I've put in the blog article. This code basically, most likely if you haven't used Dino before, it will ask you to install the Dino extension. This is used to interpret the Dino language and install dependencies. You'll also need to follow this tutorial here for Dino installation. We just need to run this command if you're on Mac, or this command if you are on Windows, and then restart your VS Code. Now, in this code, we see that we have some URID here, Webflow access token, that we need to put in here. So to take these tokens, what you need to do is to open your project settings. In my case, I'll do an open your Webflow. Actually, that won't work because it's a preview. I'll go go to my dashboard and do locate blog demo. So here, if we open apps and integrations, you can generate an API access token from this section here. So you do generate API token. Here you can put any name you want, and in CMS it's really important to put read-only or read-and-write. In my case, I just put read-and-write. Then you save the token, and when you save the token, it will give you on the Supabase 2 read-and-write and generate the token, and it will give you this access token here, which you can copy, and then to save it in your Supabase functions project, you need to run Supabase secrets set Webflow access token equals, and then you paste that token, and when you enter, it will paste the token in your project, and then discovers this part here, and then you'll need to put the collection there as well. So to find your collection ID, you need to open the designer on your project. Once you've opened this designer interface, you can, okay, I need to take back control from myself here. So when you do this, you can navigate to the CMS and the collection which you want to be synced basically, and you'll find the collection ID here. So you just copy that and replace it here, save it, and then do Supabase functions deploy to deploy this function to your Supabase project. In my case, I already have it deployed, so I'm not going to run it again. One thing to notice, I'm going to run this in my original project, is that when you're running this function, let me make this browser bigger. So when you're running this project, when you're running the command, it will ask you to put in a project. I'm choosing that. It will run some commands here, and then it will say that you can inspect your deployment in your dashboard. So you can just do command click or control click if you are on Windows to open this link. And when you are opening this link, you will find the URL basically, which you can use in Webflow. So you take this URL here, you just click on that to copy the URL code. Then you can go back to your Webflow settings and go to site settings, and in here in apps and integrations we will need to add the webhook. So you click on add webhook, you paste that URL here, and you do site publish, select API v2 and add the webhook. Basically what this code does is that not this one, sorry, I'll show you that a bit later. So what this code does is that it creates a new Supabase client so we can interact with the Supabase API. It creates a Webflow client so we can interact with the Webflow API, and then it basically goes through that collection which you've put here. It goes through every item, and for every item it checks if this item exists already in Supabase. If it already exists, then it's just going to replace the body, so this way we are always updating that body. Otherwise it's going to create, and the first time it creates that, it will also add the ID and the slug. I mean, now that I'm going through it, I think it's also a good idea to sync the slug here in case you are editing the slug later on. Otherwise it may break a bit there. But in my case, I'm just leaving it as is because it's more like a demo. Alright, so what we've done so far ensures that every time you go in your designer interface or in the editor and you add a new item to the CMS, or you edit an item, it's going to sync it with Supabase. So that way you can just edit this body inside your Webflow project without having to create a separate interface for it, and we are also not exposing this field to the public, because a lot of blogs have a huge issue when they're trying to create this, because if you stop the JavaScript, it's still going through. In a lot of cases, even if JavaScript is stopped on your machine, the user can still see that field there. In our case, it doesn't, because it gets injected only if the user is a subscriber. Alright, so going forward, we'll also need to set up a Stripe webhook, and it's the same process which we've used to set up here. We just create a new function. You can call it, I've called it Stripe webhook for an easier understanding. So what this function does is that it receives some data from Stripe when a new subscription is added or deleted. Then it checks if it retrieves the customer email, and based on that email, it goes to Supabase and it retrieves the customer ID. And basically, it puts that subscribed to false or true based on this. So if the data which is received on this webhook is a subscription deleted event, then it's going to set subscribe to false. Otherwise, it's going to set subscribe to true, and it's also going to add this Stripe ID, because most likely it's the first time that the user purchased the subscription. Alright, so you can just take the code from the blog article and publish. It has the steps. You do basically the same process. You create a function, you paste the code, you deploy. But actually before you deploy, you will need to replace this product. So in my case, in Stripe itself, I first created the product in the product catalog by clicking here on create product and setting the subscription type. And then when you click on the product, in here you'll have the product ID. So you can just copy this product ID and you paste it here, and basically this will ensure that this webhook runs only for that specific product. And next, you will need to get access of this Stripe secret key, and the way you get that key is by going to developers and API keys and revealing this test key and copying it, and then you need to add that environment variable. And the way you add the environment variable is by running the same thing as previously, Supabase secrets set, and then we give it this name here, Supabase Stripe key, and then the key which you copied from Stripe. Now, what you need to be careful of is that before you go live with this, you'll need to replace this key and most likely this product ID as well with your live product. But it's as simply as running this Stripe secret set again with the same name, and that will do the job. Alright, so what this code does basically, with this code set, we have the subscription syncing in place, so we ensure that only the subscribed users will see our content. And then I'm also checking the blog article to see what else we put in here. Correct. The next thing we did was in developers, we actually need to use that webhook. So the webhook is going to look something like this. You'll go to add to endpoint, you'll paste that URL here, which is going to, which is coming from actually this part here. So you will take this webhook and paste it. You'll take the webhook, you'll paste the URL here, and then we'll need to add two events, one for subscription deleted and one for subscription created. So we check these two fields, we click on add events, and then we click on add endpoint, and this will add the endpoint to our Stripe backend. Right, so now that we have both the Webflow and the Stripe endpoint set up, we will need to set up one more endpoint, which is going to be for the billing portal. So the first thing you need to do is to go to settings here and ensure that the billing portal is activated. So you'll need to go to billing, and here we have customer portal, and you'll have a prompt here to activate some link. Just click on that and save changes, and it will generate this billing portal. So now the regular billing link requires you to put the email if you're a customer, and then it's going to send a login link to the customer. But in our case, the user is already logged in, so why would we ask him to log in again? What we can do to prevent this is to basically use the Stripe API again and grab the Stripe ID from the user, from the Supabase profile data, and then generate the link for them with already authenticated. And this way it ensures that we have a smoother user experience process. Now, one important thing we did here is that we are requiring the developer to provide a user ID, and with that user ID we are basically extracting the profile data. But it's the same process. We can just grab the code from our blog article, paste it in here, and then deploy this function. Alright, so with these endpoints out of the way, the next thing we need to do is to customize the code based on our needs in Webflow. So this project, if you go to site settings, you will see that this project has some global code, and I'm going to walk you through what this code does in a moment. So first you will need to add this Stripe CDN link. If you are googling Supabase SDK.js, you will see this JavaScript client library, and you can take any of these two scripts. I'm using the first one. You just take the script and paste it in here, and you give it an async or defer attribute to make sure that it's performant. And then in footer code, you can just paste this code. Basically what it does is that it creates a Supabase client, so we can use the Supabase API on the front end. For this link here, you can just okay, what is that? Sorry, I'm doing some cleanup. So for the Supabase here, you'll need to replace this part, and you can replace that part by going to Supabase and grabbing this ID. You copy it and you paste it here. Then for this, this is called an anonymous key from Supabase. So to grab that, you go to project settings, you access this API tab, and here you have this anon public key. So you just copy and paste it here between the double quotes, and this is going to ensure that the Supabase client runs smoothly. By the way, you also need to replace that ID in here as well. Alright, I'll come back to this Stripe. We have one more thing which we need to ensure we have in Supabase, which is this URL. So basically I'm running this project on gated blog demo.webflow.io. So you need to grab this and put it in the settings here, otherwise your authentication will not work. So you go to settings, you go to you go to authentication. Here you have this URL configuration, and in here you paste that here inside URL. You need to make sure that it's HTTPS, and also in the redirect URL you paste it here as well, and that will ensure it works properly. And also here you'll need to replace it with your project URL. Alright, so next let's take care of this Stripe thing also. So what I did here is that I went through Stripe and I created a payment link. You can create a payment link by click on new there. You can put a product, it must be the same product, and then you can check whatever you need in here and create the link. Now after you create the link, you will I'll exit because I already have one. You will see something like this, and in here you'll need to grab this URL and basically copy this end termination, and you can paste it here. Now you need to ensure that this is here, otherwise it won't pre-fill the user email. It's this code basically grabs the user email from Supabase and it pre-fills, so that when they check out, it's using the same email. Alright, so let me give you a rundown to what this code does. I explained what this part is. This one basically grabs the user data if the user is already authenticated. Then we are grabbing the attributes on the page. So if you look in Webflow or on the final website, you'll see that we are using some attributes, like we have attribute on the billing, on the logout, and also on the join button in the navigation. So basically I'm taking the attributes, and I'm also I'm creating a profile which is empty for now. So if there is no user, then I'm displaying the I'm making the billing element and the logout element to not be displayed. Then if it already exists a user, then I'm making the join button set to none and display these two buttons. And then I'm grabbing the profile from the Supabase database. Then if there is a Stripe ID, I'm displaying the billing link. Alright, and then to populate that billing link, I'm using this Stripe billing portal URL. You need to make sure that you have the correct ID from Supabase here as well, and I'm passing the authorization that I have in Supabase. So this API is generating the billing portal URL, and I'm replacing the href on the billing element with that URL. Alright, if this failed for any reason, I'm console logging the error. Otherwise, if we don't have a Stripe ID, as I said, we are not displaying that billing element. Alright, another thing I'm doing is that on the logout element, when you're clicking on it, it's going to run this sign out code from Supabase directly, and we're reloading the page to see the changes. Alright, the next thing that it does is on the auth page, so if we go to /auth, it's going to grab the form, the auth form, which has a certain attribute on it. It has this pxm auth. No, sorry. So this is for the article itself. So in this blog, if we do an inspect, we saw them briefly there. So we have these two boxes basically. We have a pxm article auth and the pxm article subscribe. So there are two call to actions which we are getting here, the subscribe button and the article body. So basically what it does here is that if there is an article auth call to action in the body element, it goes further into this function. If there is no user, then it's going to set the auth call to action to block, which will display that box to prompt the user to log in. Otherwise, it's going to hide that. Then it's doing a similar logic on the subscribe button. So on the subscribe, if the subscribe call to action exists, and it checks if there is a user. If there is no user, it's not displaying it. Otherwise, it's going to check if the user is subscribed. If the user is not subscribed, so if the subscribed column is false, then it's going to display that call to action and set the href to that checkout URL. Otherwise, it's setting it to display none and hides it. Then for the article body element, if we don't have a user, or we have a user but it's not subscribed, then it's not going to show that article. And also for the article body element, it sets it to block otherwise. So if there is a user and it's subscribed, it's going to set this to block, and it's going to go to Supabase and grab the article. Alright, and then on the authorization form, it's going to grab the form. So now we are talking about that page, which I was mentioning earlier. It's grabbing the form, it checks if there is the form. If there is, it's also grabbing the done and fail element, so basically the confirmation which we receive after. And then I'm attaching an event listener on the form. It checks if it's being submitted. If it's being submitted, it runs this code which ensures that we don't receive that automatic logic from Webflow. Then we extract the email. It's really important when you are setting this form to name it exactly, either name it exactly like this, email, or change this here in case you change it in Webflow also. If there is no email, it returns because the email is mandatory. Otherwise, it's going to create the user or log it in and send the user that email which we've seen earlier. If there is no error, it's going to hide the form and display the done element, basically the success message. Otherwise, it's going to hide the form again and display this block. You can also show if you do display block here, you can also ensure that the form is still displayed. Alright, one thing which is super important I forgot to mention, we have this here, right? We have this not profile data, where we have the article logic. We are grabbing the article. And one thing we need to ensure is that the user doesn't trick us. If the user runs this API manually, we should still ensure that we don't display that article body to him. So to do that with Supabase, we basically create something called an RLS policy. So if I create a new table here, we have this interesting mechanism which we can use, which is called an RLS. So you just click here to add RLS, and then we have this policy here. You can just grab it from the blog article, which basically checks if the user is subscribed and only shows the data if that user is subscribed. So you put this title in, you select and then you put authenticated here, you put the authenticated tag or target role, and then here you paste this code and save the policy. And also we have another policy on the profiles which you should copy here, and this one says that only the authenticated user can view its own profile. So for any reason, if the user tries to access the profile of a different user, it's not going to return anything. So when you are selecting profiles, so when a user selects a profile, they can only select their own profile. You can grab these policies, like I said, from the blog article and paste them there. And with this done, this logic should run properly on your project as well. So this is all from my side. I hope it was insightful, and I'll see you in the next video. Thank you.